I do consent. There we go. Okay. Get my gavel out, make it official. And good morning. I'm going to go ahead and call this session of the City of Lacey Hearings Examiner to order. For the record, today is July 7th at 2021 at 10 a.m. We have one item on the agenda today. This is number 20-307, a request for preliminary plat approval to subdivide 15.66 acres between 6th Avenue Northeast and 15th Avenue Northeast, east of Sleater-Kinney Road, into 82 lots for single family development with associated appurtenances and improvements, including open space, roadways, and stormwater improvements on approximately 10 acres, with the remainder of the property set aside for future development. And in addition, the applicant has applied for a Class 4 forest practices permit. My name is Andrew Reeves. I'm a hearing examiner with Sound Law Center, who the city has selected to hold certain land use application hearings like this one. And today it will be my role to collect evidence in the form of exhibits and testimony to determine whether this proposal complies with the city's comprehensive plan, zoning ordinances, critical areas ordinances, and because the project involves the subdivision of land, ensure it complies with our state subdivision act, which is in chapter 5817 of the revised code of Washington, and the specific requirements for approval of a preliminary plat as well as a Class 4 forest practices permit under the Lacey Municipal Code. To that end, I received 37 exhibits in advance of the hearing today. These include a staff report prepared by city staff, the application materials themselves, including a project narrative and various maps and plans associated with this, the forest practices application as well, information, sort of review information from reviewing agencies, as well as the reviewing departments in the city, information of a technical nature, including a preliminary drainage report, a traffic impact analysis, a priority species mitigation plan, a tree protection plan, and other information, again, of a technical nature, information on the environmental review that occurred under our state's Environmental Policy Act, information about the notice that went out in relation to the application as well as today's hearing, and then several comments from members of the public that had some concerns about the proposal. So I've reviewed those 37 exhibits and I am admitting them into the record now. Should anyone have additional exhibits they'd like admitted into the record, let me know when it's your opportunity to testify, and I'll go ahead and address admitting additional exhibits at that time. Speaking of testimony, our testimony today will be under oath or affirmation. That's because we're my decision to be appealed, the audio recording of today's hearing, as well as the admitted exhibits, and my decision would serve as the foundation for any such appeal. I may and often do ask questions of those that are testifying. I'm not trying to trip anyone up. I'm just trying to ensure I have a thorough understanding of the proposal so that within 10 business days of the record closing, I am able to produce a decision that is hopefully clear, cogent, and legally defensible. Finally, the order that we often follow, I should have asked in advance. Michelle, is the city going first today or the applicant? What was your plan?
The city will go first.
Okay, so first we will hear from city staff, who will give an overview of the proposal and explain any recommendations unique to the proposal that the city may have. After that, we'll turn it to our applicant representative and applicant team to present any additional information they feel that myself or members of the public should be aware of in advance of me making a decision. Then we will see if there are members of the public interested in testifying, and they will have that opportunity. Folks will remain muted until called upon by me or by sort of your team leader can also explain that they would like you to speak. But the order with these remote hearings, we got to try to make sure that we don't have crosstalk. So again, we'll go first to the city, then to the applicant team, then we'll see if there are members of the public interested in testifying. And if appropriate, at the end, I will then turn it back to the applicant team and city staff to respond to any public testimony. So I believe that covers it. And with that, we'll go ahead and get planning staff sworn in. So Michelle, do you swear affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. And if you could just clearly spell your name for the audio, I'm trying to get in the habit of forcing people to do that because I've had a few incidences.
Okay. Certainly. My name is Sarah Schelling, Sarah, S-A-R-A-H. Last name Schelling, S-C-H-E-L-L-I-N-G, Schelling. And I am a senior planner with the city of Lacey.
Great, thank you, Michelle, and go ahead.
All right, I'm going to share my screen.
Okay,
I just have a brief PowerPoint to, whoops, that's the wrong screen. Let me try again.
while you're working on that, did you want to make this an additional exhibit or is this just demonstrative?
It's just demonstrative.
Excellent.
Is it sharing that?
I'm seeing something. It's not blown up as the full PowerPoint
Let's
yet, so I'm seeing the slide deck too.
Okay, all right, there we go.
There,
How's that?
there you go.
Okay. Thank you. So good morning. As you mentioned, in your opening, today we are reviewing the subdivision application of, project 20-307, the subdivision of Bradley Park, as well as the associated Class 4 forest practices permit application. We'll start with the location of the project. It is located in sort of north central Lacey along the northern, boundary limits, between 15th Avenue Northeast and 6th Avenue Northeast, east of Sleater Kinney Road. 15.66 acres in size. The subdivision proposal is to subdivide 82 of the northern 2/3 of the parcel into 82 lots for single family development. Currently, the project site is undeveloped. It is forested primarily with Douglas fir as the dominant tree species, as well as some big leaf maple, western hemlock, and western red cedar trees on the northern two-thirds of the parcel. The southern third of the parcel is grassland with blackberries, Scotch broom, other types of vegetation. The surrounding land use for this site is generally residential to the north, east, and west. Of various densities and housing types. It includes single family, multifamily apartments, and duplex and triplex developments. And across 6th Avenue to the south is North Thurston High School and Chinook Middle School. The parcel is zoned mixed use, moderate density corridor for the city's zoning map, and which is governed by the Lacey Municipal Code, Chapter 1622. The intent of this zone is to gradually develop it into a mixed-use, moderate density residential and commercial area with primary commercial corridors on Sleater Kinney and Pacific Avenue. Pacific Avenue doesn't touch this zone. In this area, there are two different zones for the mixed-use, moderate density corridor, and the commercial corridor for this parcel would be Sleater Kinney off to the west. As I mentioned, it's in north central Lacey. It's the Pleasant Glade planning area, which is approximately 1,300 acres in size. 1/3 of the planning area is an unincorporated Thurston County, but within the urban growth area of the city of Lacey. And urban growth of this type is envisioned for this property as well as other property within city limits and in this zoning district. The applicant is proposing to transition this undeveloped parcel surrounded by residential into moderate density single family development. And again, this is the type of development that is proposed and anticipated with this zoning classification. Residential uses are permitted within this zoning district at a density of between 8 and 12 units per acre. When you take the 10 units that they're proposing to, or the 10 acres that they're proposing to develop into single family, that is approximately 8.2 units per acre. I'd note that this parcel under the current zoning standards could accommodate up to 188 residential units. Obviously it wouldn't be in single family, but it is sizable enough to accommodate a lot of development. And this proposal is for single family development, which is consistent with the existing residential units surrounding the parcel. In reviewing the project, we looked at because it's a plat, we looked at the city's subdivision ordinance 15.12. We also looked at the zoning chapter 16.22 for mixed use moderate density zoning district. And there's some issues not issues per se, but when reviewing the mixed use moderate density zoning standards, The lot standards, setback standards are more appropriate to commercial and multifamily development than they are to single family development, which is proposed here. Both the subdivision chapter 1512 and 16.22, the zoning chapter, do allow for some flexibility in how setbacks and lot sizes are applied. And based on the density for residential uses in this zone, we recommended that the applicant use the moderate density zoning district standards for lot size, setbacks, and setbacks in order to keep it consistent with the residential development in the area. So what we've proposed is that they, or recommended is that they use the setbacks particularly and minimum lot sizes that would apply to a moderate density standard. So a minimum lot size of 4,000 square feet where you don't have alley access and 3,500 square feet where you do have alley access. Setbacks, which would be typical of single family residential, of 5 feet on each side, 15 feet in the rear, and 20 feet to a garage in the front. The applicant has designed their plat to these standards. Some of the other things that came up during project review that I'll just touch upon. The project was originally submitted in November of 2020, and it was determined complete in December of 2020. We routed the materials for review with the comment period, posted the notice on site and in the paper, and we did receive a number of email letters and comments from members of the surrounding community, as well as city staff and staff from adjacent jurisdictions requesting mitigation. But some of the concerns from the surrounding community were related to traffic impacts, project density and compatibility, school impacts, tree removal, and particularly impacts to wildlife in the area. This is one of the few large undeveloped sites left in the city limits of Lacey, and it's got some residential development around it, and it is home to or it does accommodate wildlife of various degrees. And one particular letter did provide some photos of wildlife that drew our attention, particularly as it related to the pileated woodpecker and a Pacific band-tailed pigeon. We consulted with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, who recommended that a species mitigation plan be prepared. During the project review, we also received comments from our stormwater engineer. He provided comments that asked for additional information related to stormwater design be submitted as well prior to moving forward. So we stopped the regulatory review clock in order to get information related to the woodpecker and any habitat on site, as well as to get additional review for the stormwater plan. The applicant revised their materials, submitted a priority species mitigation plan, which actually identified the pileated woodpecker as being located on the property with a few different feeding stations and nesting stations as well. So that priority species mitigation plan, as well as a revised drainage report, were resubmitted in March of 2021. That the plans were routed for an additional review. The Department of Fish and Wildlife did review the priority species mitigation plan and noted that it met the requirements of a priority species plan. I'm going to forward a little, I'll show you the plat that was resubmitted to us. So they resubmitted the plat to address not only drainage issues, but also some fire code related issues, the priority species mitigation plan requirements as well. The mitigation plan, I'll go ahead and put up the recommendations out of the mitigation plan. So you'll see on the screen, there are dots located throughout the property. And these are sites that were feeding stations for the woodpecker. The wildlife biologist recommended a critical habitat area be set aside in the southern portion of the property. And this location worked well for the development. It was planned to be an open space tract already. It's also the area where there are the most trees that are suitable for retention, which most trees suitable for retention are located in this area and can accommodate additional feeding stations that would be transplanted to the area, as well as some of the open space requirements for the subdivision. The forester reviewed and provided a tree report with the application materials and noted this area as the one where the trees would be most likely to survive and be long-term trees for the project. So the habitat mitigation plan and the tree protection area work in concert there to meet some of the requirements for the subdivision. The Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife did note that some concerns related to the location of the mitigation area. However, they also noted that stormwater requirements, other platting requirements may have impacted the location. And I think to some degree or to a large degree, that's true. The Fish and Wildlife did recommend that potentially the mitigation area be located in the northeast area of the site, which is where the stormwater pond is. And I think either Doug Christensen, our stormwater engineer, or Tyrell for the applicant, Tyrell Bradley, can speak to why this location was selected for the stormwater facilities rather than the location for the habitat area. But I will note that the forester did recommend this location in particular for retention of trees, which makes it also ideal for the priority species mitigation area. Moving on to trees, the tree and the Class 4 forest practices permit application. Subdivisions in the city of Lacey are required to set aside a 5% tree tract. The forester did review the materials and made a recommendation for the area in the south, which is still shown on the screen, to be the tree tract. A Class 4 forest practices permit is required for this parcel because they're proposing removal of 570,000 board feet of timber from the property. And what the Class 4 forest practices permit allows us to do, it allows us to include conditions for tree retention, but it also is a permit that is then forwarded on to the Department of Revenue and allows the Department of Revenue to tax the timber, the saleable timber that comes from the property. So that's what the Class 4 forest practices permit application is for with this application, is to ensure that appropriate fees are paid and taxes are paid on that, as well as to ensure that tree protection occurs on site during the construction of the plat. Some of the other issues that I'll touch on that were brought up during the review period are related to traffic concerns. 15th Avenue and 6th Avenue Northeast are both arterial roadways in the city that handle a lot of vehicles every day. And residents out there have continued to voice concerns about the intersections and the volume of traffic on 15th Avenue in particular. The applicant did submit a traffic impact analysis, which assessed the impacts of traffic on the surrounding roadways and projects. Adjacent jurisdictions, 15th Avenue Northeast, I'll note, it's the northern city limits of the city of Lacey. And so 15th Avenue is actually within the jurisdiction, the entire roadway is within the jurisdiction of Thurston County. Thurston County did review the traffic impact analysis as well as the plat materials and did request mitigation. They do have a project on 15th Avenue Northeast that they've requested payment of mitigation fees for, and they've also requested that frontage improvements be installed with this project on 15th Avenue Northeast in order to mitigate traffic impacts related to this subdivision. Internally, the subdivision will be served by minor local residential roads, and there will be an access to both 15th Avenue and 6th Avenue in hopes that that will help distribute trips from this development across the road network. The last thing I'll touch on in regards to public comments is in relationship to compatibility. This is converting a 15-acre tract of undeveloped property into an 82-unit subdivision. Existing residences to the east and west are going to be the ones who have the most day-to-day impacts with the conversion of the property. There's not typically buffer requirements of single-family residential to single-family residential. We did have a request from an adjacent neighbor who owns some properties off to the west. There are 4 subdivisions. I'm just going to actually go back to, or 4 duplexes located directly west of the site, owned by one individual, Robert Ben, who submitted a letter. And actually he submitted another letter that I would like to add into the exhibit list after I'm done here. He submitted another letter and again requested a 6-foot tall cedar fence on the property line adjacent to his existing duplexes to help with impacts associated with the development of these part of the subdivision. I've included that as a recommended condition that a 6-foot tall cedar fence be constructed on both sides of the subdivision. And I believe the applicant is intending to install that fence with the development of the property, and they can speak to that when they when it is their turn. Additionally, there are some other things that can be done to mitigate impacts to existing residences, existing adjacent residences. Some of those things include planting on the rear property lines with tree species that are fast growing to help provide a future buffer. And I've recommended that as a condition. In addition to tree tract requirements in the city also has minimum tree per lot requirements that apply to every lot in the city. And what we'll look for when building permits are submitted is that the minimum tree per lot requirements, that those trees are focused toward the rear property line to serve as a buffer to existing residential uses. These are pretty small lots, so that's 2 trees, but along that property line in the back where it's 40 feet, that's probably about what you would get or all that you could really accommodate on those property lines anyway. We recommend that as a condition as well. We'll also, design review is also going to be required, and one of the elements of single family design review is that looking at things like window placement and location on lots to make sure that we're maximizing privacy to adjacent as well as new units located next to each other on adjacent properties. So we can assess compatibility and privacy issues during the design review phase as well. And we've included a condition related to that as well. We reviewed the application, as I mentioned, with to assess for compatibility with our comprehensive plan goals and policies. We issued a mitigated determination of non-significance for this project. Mitigation included requirements for traffic impact fees to both Thurston County and the City of Olympia to mitigate traffic impacts. Other impacts can be mitigated through requirements and conditions based on our ordinances. So with conditions of approval that we've recommended in the staff report, we recommend approval of the project. And I'd be happy to take any questions you have at this time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Schelling. So let's see. I'm trying to think where to start. Okay, so
Okay.
first off, I guess I always get somewhat lost. So in the city of Lacey, you explain the zoning designation is mixed use moderate density corridor, and you explain this is in the Pleasant Glade planning area.
Correct.
Is the comp plan designation Pleasant Glade planning area or mixed use moderate density corridor or something else entirely?
No, the comp plan designation would be the same as the zoning. So it's mixed use moderate density corridor and located within the Pleasant Glade planning area. So the planning area is the neighborhood.
And are they coterminous through the whole city and I just need to get that through my thick skull or? Yes. Oh, they are, okay, good. Yes. Mental note, imprint on brain, okay. Thank you for clarifying that. And the staff report goes into detail on the comprehensive plan. I just wanted to make sure I understood what the designation was.
Yes, sorry.
Not a problem at all. So if we go back to, what was the slide? I think the lot layout slide.
Okay.
I guess my question is, and I think this is the same as what I have in terms of exhibits, if I can get my pad to work. This would be like exhibit 6, essentially, I think.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah, so you had testified that staff has sort of recognized that there's no, we'll call them performance standards maybe, in the mixed use moderate density zone. And as a result, staff has recommended using the moderate density requirements, residential requirements for things like setbacks and lot sizes.
Correct.
And then you had testified, I think, that the minimum lot size in that zone would be 4,000 square feet. But at least what I show on this slide is the minimum here would be 3,000 and the average would be 3,688.
That's probably right. I don't have the zoning chapter in front of me, but yes, we would recommend using the moderate density, which alley loaded are probably 3,000 square feet for alley, and let's see, I'm going to exit my full screen and I can bring up the zoning chapter.
Okay, I guess my question was, whether something like lot averaging would be necessary, or, I mean, because again, technically, none of, using the mixed use, using the moderate density wouldn't be required, but if they're
It's true.
meeting the moderate density, I guess it doesn't matter. Is that the basic idea?
No, I believe so the minimum lot area for moderate density is 3,000 square feet with alleys. So they've proposed the minimum lot area on the 3,000 square feet
Okay.
with alleys, and 4,000 square feet on the lots without alleys. That's how they have laid it out. I just misspoke. I didn't have that zoning chapter in front of me.
No problem. Okay, so that cleared that up in my head, so thank you. Okay, and then if we can go back to that slide you had on mitigation.
Yep.
And I know we'll hear more about this, I'm sure, but I think it was that one. No,
Or
a little further.
the blow up. Yep.
And actually, even the bigger, if we can go further out,
This one or
I think there was one more.
that one.
That one.
Yep.
So I guess my question is, so clearly the southern portion is owned by the church, I believe. There's not a church there, but there's reference or discussion of potentially a future church there. And so I assume that this tree tract area that shows all of the, trees where the pileated woodpeckers would be preserved.
Yes.
But I guess my other question is, here, there's reference to Himalayan blackberry, which is, as we know, not native and invasive species being preserved, and a grassy area being preserved. And if you're not the right person to speak to it, and we should hear from someone else ultimately, that's fine. I guess, are those areas counted as preserved in any functional way that is beneficial to?
No, I think I believe what that is just saying is that those areas aren't being developed at this time. The blackberry is not necessarily going to be preserved. And the grassy area is not preserved in any way that benefits the woodpecker. The forested mitigation area is what benefits the woodpecker, and that area will be set aside in a tract. The church owns obviously the entire parcel, and they're working with the applicant. And this tree tract, this mitigation area, will be preserved with that development in the future as well. It'll be required to be set aside with this plat and protected regardless of what happens to the south.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying that, because I've never seen Himalayan blackberry being preserved on purpose before.
Right.
So, okay, so
Unless it's for pies.
yeah, there you go. That's how we got to get rid of them. We all got to eat all the pies. So I guess this slide will work fine just while we can visualize. We talked about density, and you explained that, theoretically something like 188 units could go on that was the entire site, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
So I guess in the future, if, you know, a church goes in, that'll have its own process. If there was further platting of this area, what would the process be? And would you have to account for the existing plat infrastructure and lots, et cetera, when calculating everything? I think I know the answer, but I'd rather have you verify.
I don't, so if additional platting were to take place, I think that, I don't think that it would matter all that much. It would still have to be platted based on the size of the parcel, which would still be 8 to 12 units per acre, a new subdivision. I think the only potential challenges to that would be this parcel, this project has been set up, the open space, the tree tracks, all those items have been based on the entire 15.66 acres. And I don't know that if that would necessarily be a problem, especially if the same applicant came in to further subdivide. But there might be some considerations that we'd have to make in the future to look at how they address open space, or if they needed to address open space as a separate tract or a separate plat in the future. But they'd still have to meet the minimum density requirements of 8 to 12 units per acre.
Okay, so yeah, essentially if someone down the road can't, you know, 10 years said, oh, no church is ever gonna go in, the property owner says, you know, we'd rather have more development, someone wants to put multifamily housing down in near 6th Avenue, you know, you would sort of, I guess you'd need a plat amendment for one, if this is all under the, if you don't partition this off as about, you know, split it off as a new parcel. So that's its own complicated, you know, project. But you would, if you treated it as one lot, you would have to, or one parcel, all the density requirements, open space would have to be met with
Yes,
the increased number of units. Is that an
that's
accurate understanding?
Yep. And it would, you know, theoretically, the zoning district could change as well in the future, and it would have to meet all zoning requirements in place at the time of development.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for explaining that. And then I think just a few more specific questions, if I can find them. You already answered that one. Okay. Woodpecker. Sorry, just had a lot of exhibits this time. Let's see. That's for the applicant. We already discussed that. Actually, I think those were well, has the comprehensive plan or zoning code been amended in any way that would impact this proposal for vesting purposes?
No.
No, okay, excellent. So then I think those were the specific questions I had for you, Ms. Schelling. If you wanted to call on any of your team before we move to the applicant, fine with me, or we can wait to the end, and if necessary, we can hear from them. What's your thinking?
I did receive some questions in an email, and I believe this individual is participating or here at the hearing. I did receive some questions from a community member by email today that he wanted to have addressed. Do you want to wait until we address community or anybody who wants to participate in the hearing, or do you want to talk about those questions now?
Sure. So okay. So let's talk about exhibits for 1 sec.
Sure.
So originally, did the 37 exhibits track with what you had?
I have 37 exhibits that were submitted. I do have another letter that I received yesterday.
Okay, so you have an exhibit 38 from whom?
A letter from Robert Ben.
Okay, who submitted earlier comments?
He also submitted earlier comments. Yeah.
Okay. And then
Do
you
you
said
want to be read in, or did you just want me to send it in to you?
you could just send it in, but my sense, at least from your testimony, was that related to he's the owns the duplexes and wants a fence on
Correct.
each side. Okay, so I
Correct.
think we understand that. And then you said there's another individual that provided email comments today. Did you want to
Correct.
make those part of the record?
I think they can be. He may testify, but if not, yes, we can make them, we should make them part of the record.
Yeah, so why don't we do that? So I then assume that this would be Art Orth, is that right?
Art Orth, that's correct.
Okay. So maybe then if Mr. Orth is the only other member of the public I'm seeing that has attended, it might be useful then to just hear from Mr. Orth now, and then we can go to the applicant so that the whole team can sort of, answer any questions he might have as best as they can. And then if he's got other things, he can move on. And does
I
that make
think,
sense to you?
yeah, it does make sense, because I think that he has some questions that some of the members of the team should answer.
Excellent. Okay, so why don't we unmute Mr. Orth? So Mr. Orth, you are unmuted there.
Hello,
Hi.
can you hear me?
I can hear you great. I'm going to swear you in, Mr. Orth. Do you swear affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
Thank you. And can you just clearly spell your name for the audio recording?
Art, A-R-T, Orth, O-R-T-H.
Great. Thank you for being here, sir. And just to clarify, so Ms. Schelling said you had submitted email comments or sort of questions to her this morning, perhaps, or yesterday, and I was going to include those as Exhibit 39 in my official record. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Excellent. And now is your opportunity. So we're not going to be able to do a sort of back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, but if you can kind of list what your questions are, then I'll turn it to the experts to try to get answers. Okay.
Okay, so I live on the 920 block. I have two parcels. I have a front parcel with two homes and a rear parcel about an acre that butts up to this new development. And my concerns are that I have no access to sewer, and it's questionable if I have any access to water. And so, is the new developer going to stub out a sewer main for my back piece? Because at some point, maybe I would want to develop or even sell it and have all these things in alignment. The other concern I have is how am I going to access it? What sort of easement is going to be provided for me to access my back parcel? I've already talked to the city of Olympia, and they have denied me access on the north side of my property, which borders that retainment pond. The Slater Landing, which is to the south of me, it looks like they had designed it to have an easement access go into my back parcel, but I'm not sure if that's going to be approved. And then looking at all the parcels from the D.R. Horton project, those are all lots. And I was told that the only way I could get access to my back piece is if I actually bought a lot and provided an easement. So those are my main concerns, is how am I going to access that back piece, and what about sewer and water?
Thank you. I real quick, I can't really control the slide deck here, but the one we have up at least kind of shows. Okay, thank you. So the part being circled by Ms. Schelling is that, can you
Yes.
sort of clarify? So you have a back parcel there, and then, which is undeveloped, correct?
Correct.
And then you also have a parcel you live on, or you have access?
Yeah,
to-
the front parcel has two homes, both on one parcel.
Oh, okay, here, this is a better one. Okay, here we go.
Yeah,
Okay, so you have access to the two homes from Sleater Kinney Road, but your concern is access to the back
Correct.
Act 40 or whatever we want to call it.
Yeah, it's about an acre.
Yeah, okay, the back acre. So that was one big concern, and then the other big one was a question about, what's going on with water and sewer within the development, and is it possible to have that be stubbed out so that potential future development of your parcel would be able to have water and sewer? Does that sum up the concerns?
That is correct. And one more point, in speaking to the
Sure.
city of Olympia, when they ran sewer down the center of Slater Kinney, she told me that they did not stub out for my piece because they assumed that the city of Lacey would be servicing us. So it's kind of gone back and forth.
Sure, and to be clear, Ms. Schelling is City of Lacey, and I'm guessing this happened prior to, well, I don't know, but so that was probably not the person you talked to, I would imagine, but you said City of Olympia ran the sewer down Slater.
Correct. And that
Okay.
was Diane Utter who I spoke to about that. And she said that is why they did not stub out for us, because they were under the assumption that the city of Lacey would provide me with sewer at
Okay,
that time.
great. Well, we will, so these are specific questions that hopefully we can get answers to. So I think, Ms. Schelling, just as a preliminary matter, do you have any knowledge of what the sewer line, or one of your team members, maybe Mr. Christensen?
I think Tom Stiles can speak to the sewer and water, how that's laid out in
Okay,
subdivision.
great. Why don't we then hear from him first?
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Stiles, good to see you. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
Thank you, sir. And if you could just clearly spell your name for the audio recording.
My name is Tom Stiles. I'm the development review engineer. It's spelled TOMSTILES.
Thank you, Mr. Stiles.
So I can give some background onto Mr. Orth's questions. When the city of Olympia originally put in their main, they have a lift station to the north of his property. They put it in for their benefit. And after that occurred, we had development to the south of his property, the Slater Landing project. And the applicant for that project requested that he be served with City of Olympia sewer rather than City of Lacey sewer, because our sewer was a pressure sewer system and Olympia's is a gravity sewer system. And so we negotiated, and this wasn't my department, but through our water resources department, we negotiated a service area that is now along Slater Kinney, that all the parcels, Mr. Orth's included, are now in their service area for service. So it's a gravity line. Also, just side note, not always whenever a main is extended by a agency is there stubs provided to all of the lots. That's ideal. And that's the best thing to happen, but it doesn't always happen. But it was more of a, in this case, a timing issue of, hey, it makes more sense to do this by gravity rather than a force main. And so we negotiated with the city of Olympia and they took over an area. I don't have that whole map, but I do know the parcels that are along Slater Kinney up to 15th Avenue were all in that new City of Olympia service area.
Okay.
And I know that, side note, on October 14th, 2020, we had a pre-submission conference with Art and Marlene Orth, and we did talk about this as being the case for service for their property.
And I don't know, Mr. Stiles, if you're the person to talk to, but I guess I'm confused. normally you're not allowed to create landlocked parcels. And so do we happen to know how there is a landlocked parcel, or if there's a landlocked parcel here, the back acres that Mr. Orth has? Clearly it's divided, but
Yeah, that was a question I did have for Mr. Orth. I mean, you're right. Typically, a landlocked parcel is not allowed to be created. So I'm curious to what the provisions are for ingress egress utilities to that back lot right now for that parcel, but I don't know.
okay. Mr. Orth, I'm gonna just go back to you for a sec. Do you happen to know how this happened, or, I mean, I guess from the aerial, it looks almost as if the driveway serving the front two houses could be extended further to provide access to the back acre. But at least from a legal standpoint, you're generally, cities will never approve a subdivision or a short plat that will create a landlocked parcel. So any info you could provide would help clarify this.
So if I'm understanding, so to the south of me, then there's no room between Slater Landing and my property for an easement. To the north of me, where I border the retention pond, there technically would be room to put an easement in there to access my back piece. But in talking with the city of Olympia, they denied me access. They denied me the ability to have an easement there. So from there, the only other option would be from the DR Horton side of things, or the Slater Landing development, which if you look at that Slater Landing, it looks like that could be used as an easement as they stopped their road right up to the edge of my property.
Sorry, which is Slater Landing? Is that?
That would be to the
directly
south.
Okay, so I
Yes,
guess
there.
it's hard to tell on the aerial. I mean, at least from the aerial, I don't know if we can zoom in at all, Michelle, if that's even possible, but if we were able to zoom in at all on Mr. Orth's lots, I guess without seeing,
I'm trying to.
it's okay if you can't. I mean,
I
to me,
can't
it
on
looks,
this aerial photo. I'm trying to figure out if I can. And I'm trying to look into the legal description and stuff of the lots too. And I
Okay.
just think they're old grandfathered lots. I
Is
would
that
say,
it?
what? I don't
Yeah,
see.
I mean, I apologize. To me, it looks like the north, I get what, rather than, I guess in my mind, rather than needing an easement on a neighboring property to the north, it seems that there should be an existing easement already on Mr. Orr's property that abuts Sleater Kenny that would allow access to the back 40.
That's what I would say.
That
as
would be the
well.
sort of common sense thing, but
Yeah, and without doing a title search on the parcel, I
Right.
don't know what's exactly existing. When I pull up, when I click on the parcel and get parcel information, it looks like it's just they're grandfathered lots. There's no, reference to subdivision or short plats or anything like that.
okay.
But I would imagine that there would have to be an easement from the front parcel, and I don't think we would require DR Horton to provide access to Mr. Orth through their subdivision. I think that that's probably something he would have to negotiate with them, or negotiate with one of the other property owners around. I don't know if Taylor Avenue would be something that we would consider for Mr., but that would be a different conversation, a different time, not subject to this subdivision. But we can't require DR Horton to provide access to this rear property. We would say Mr. Orth needs to figure out how to get access from his front property, or work with work with DR Horton to negotiate that, or work with Sleater Landing to negotiate that separately.
Sure, and Mr. Orth, to be clear, I understand the concern. It's very strange, and it's without knowing exactly the history of how we ended up with these parcels where you've got one that is totally landlocked. It's a rare situation. Normally you'd have, if we talk about easements, your front lot would be the sort of servient lot, and the back lot would be able to be accessed through the front lot. and you wouldn't need an easement on any other property owned by anyone else. I mean, that would be the traditional legal way that this would have occurred. But you know, what we'll do now, I think, is we'll go to the DR Horton team and see if they have someone in particular that wants to speak to, you know, without getting into the weeds, if anyone wants to speak to the potential to provide access or even the potential to stub or provide, you know, potentially stub sewer and water over toward that back property. I will give Mr. Bradley an opportunity. I'm not going to require that of them, but if they want to speak to it, or if they want to talk to you, Mr. Orth, at a later date, you know, it's a little beyond the scope of what I'm analyzing today, but I fully understand what your concern is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to Mr. Bradley.
If I can interject,
go ahead.
I did pull up the Google map, and I believe the property line runs right in front of this.
That's correct.
It
Structure
looks
back
like
there.
there's driveway access, and so in order to develop this parcel, what we would need to do is
Just-
legitimize that access with an easement. Or we'd look at redeveloping both of the in the future. But you're right, it's not something that's subject to this discussion today, really.
Right, okay, yeah, that's what I was seeing. So it does look like there is whether there's an easement or not, there's access to the back. But is that a garage or something back there?
There-
Mr. Orth?
There is access, but it's not wide enough, from my understanding, to be an actual easement. So I'd have to take a portion of that north piece owned by the city of Olympia to have a legal wide and legal easement. There is an old shop in the back, and all of that can, you know, be worked around, but that's what I
guess,
know.
just to clarify, the church who owns the property that we're looking at right now, I can't fathom in any way, shape, or form from a legal standpoint that they have any requirement to let you have access because of the strange grandfathered nature of what happened with your parcels. But again, I'm gonna at least turn to the applicant and Mr. Bradley. They can speak to it if they want. If not, maybe talk to them outside of today's hearing to try to sort something if possible, or work with whoever owns the subdivision or the HOA to the south, you know, because it does look like, looking closely there, that Taylor Lane at least could potentially, if development was something you were interested in, stub up, but also beyond the scope of what we're doing here today. So I will turn it to Mr. Bradley now. I thank you, Mr. Orth. I don't know if we're going to end up getting you the answers you were hoping for, but you know, we'll at least hear what the applicant team has to say in regards to access and water and sewer. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. So again, Mr. Bradley, on behalf of DR Horton, and Mr. Bradley, I can't recall, are you an attorney, not an attorney? I don't remember.
I'm a civil engineer.
Okay, I'll swear you in. Do you swear to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
I guess we just don't trust attorneys to tell the truth, so we don't swear them in. I don't know how that works. But Mr. Bradley, could you clearly spell your name for the audio recording?
Yeah. TYRELL BRADLEY.
Great, thank you. So
I'm,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was just saying, I'm the applicant's engineer.
Applicant's engineer. And Mr. Bradley, so first off, if we can just, again, if you have a team member or you yourself want to speak to the issues we just discussed with Mr. Orth, this would be an opportunity, or if you'd prefer to, you know, exchange emails or something, and you guys can try to sort it out beyond the scope of what we're dealing with today, I'm fine with that. But
On behalf of the applicant, we'd like to defer future conversations with Mr. Orth outside of this hearing.
okay. So Mr. Orth, I understand where they're coming from. Again, it's the concerns you have are a little beyond the scope of what we are able to address in terms of this particular property and what I'm sort of the criteria for approval and review that I will be addressing. But Mr. Bradley, is there a way Mr. Orth can reach out to you, at least an email or something?
Absolutely, yeah. So my email is my first name dot my last name at scjalliance.com. I don't know if you can see the spelling of my name on the Zoom call, but
Yeah, I see it.
okay.
Okay,
Could you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, TYRELL dot BRADLEY at SCJ Alliance ALLIANCE.com.
Thank you.
okay. So Mr. Orth, if you'd like a copy of the decision I ultimately produce, one way or the other, Ms. Schelling can ensure that you get a copy when it's done. And you know, and you now have Mr. Bradley's email. Sorry, we couldn't be more specific, but now that I understand kind of what the concern is, it is, I think, a strange, just grandfathered, who knows what happened, and you know, I think working with Mr. Bradley, you know, outside of this context, and maybe the property owner to the south would be the most feasible way forward. But with that, I think we're going to move on to all the other things that I'm going to address today. So I thank you, Mr. Orth. You're welcome to stay and watch the rest of the hearing, but we're going to go ahead and mute you at this point and continue on. Okay, sir?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so with that, Mr. Bradley, moving on, the sort of, well, did you have a plan? Did you want to call on people for certain reasons? Did you want me to field questions and then you'll call on your team? What were you thinking?
I have just a couple items that we want to clarify, a few things, I guess, that the applicant we would like to state. First off, I'd just like to say that I'm really honored to be a part of this project. My very short back history is my grandfather purchased this as part of the church, you know, almost 50 years ago. So as his grandson, I'm very honored to be a part of the applicant's consulting team to complete the development of this project some 50 years later. So I'm very excited to be a part of this team. So I'll start by saying we've reviewed the city's conditions. And Sarah, I had a question. Are you entering the changes later, or?
We can talk about that now. The applicant, I know you usually get to this during the hearing, the applicant has reviewed the conditions. We have had some conversations about some of them, and they've requested some adjustment to language. And we've looked at that and reviewed that as city staff, and we've adjusted some language, just it's essentially clarifying language on those conditions. I think there's 6 of them. And I was going to submit some revised language as another exhibit. I don't know if you want to handle that now or.
Sure, that's fine with me. I don't know if we need to like really drill down to the detail.
Okay.
I mean, if has Mr. Bradley seen what city staff has worked on? Is there agreement on the revised language?
Yeah, I will say from the applicant's standpoint, we have reviewed all the revisions and accept them.
Okay, so then why don't we go ahead and make that exhibit 40?
Okay.
And that'll be revisions to proposed conditions. And were there additional conditions, Mr. Bradley, that the applicant wanted to speak to at this point?
I wanted to speak briefly to the priority species mitigation area, and just to clarify one point that Ms. Schelling brought up when she was speaking about the stormwater being located in the northeast portion of the development. And the entire site is underlain with glacial till, which limits most of the infiltration capabilities across the project site. Now in the northeast corner, there's a little chunk of outwash where our geotechnical engineer was able to identify infiltration at that location. And I've worked with Mr. Christensen at the city to sort of tailor our entire stormwater plan to allow us to be able to meet the current stormwater code. That backed by the tree report prepared by Mr. McFarland, Sound Urban Forestry, where he identified that early on as the only viable spot to maintain existing vegetation. And so working with him, Curtis Wambach and EnviroVector to kind of create this whole mitigation plan. That's why we located it where we did. I know that WDFW had questioned, well, why wasn't it in the northeast corner? And there was multiple reasons why. I just wanted to add that stormwater component.
Sure, and just to be clear, so there's a stormwater, ultimately it's a vault, correct, in the northeast corner?
It's a pond.
Oh, it's a pond. Okay, so it's a pond, but it'll have infiltration, but then in addition, there's something like 52, if I remember right, dry wells on 50
Correct.
the lots that'll
Correct.
have infiltration of the roof rainwater. Is that right?
That's correct.
And
Yeah.
that was something the city had recommended. They wanted disbursement of the stormwater further throughout that. I'm getting the okay sign from Mr. Christensen. So so I understand how stormwater is going to work. So essentially the sort of I assume all the dirty surfaces, the road, all that'll end up in the stormwater pond and be treated. Because I believe you are in a critical aquifer recharge area here, so there needs to be some treatment, but then it'll infiltrate. Am I understanding that right?
Correct.
Okay. And I'll let Mr. Christensen speak to it too. Why don't we just let Mr. Christensen speak about stormwater for a sec? Mr. Christensen, do you swear for him to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
Thank you for being here, sir. If you could just clearly spell your name for the record.
My name's Doug Christensen. That's DougChristenson. I'm the drainage manual administrator for the city.
Great. Go ahead.
Well, I worked with Mr. Bradley on their development of their stormwater plan. One of the things we try to do is to retain, disperse, and infiltrate stormwater on the site as much as we can, rather than concentrating it and discharging it off-site. And he did a good job of meeting that objective of our stormwater regulations. Like he said, most of the site's underlain by compacted subglacial till, which means you have a thin several feet of soil, and then you have this layer that doesn't drain very well. And really they were limited to the northeast and along the east side of the project site are really the only areas that drain very well, where they have a chance of meeting the stormwater manual without discharging off site. So they show up in the northeast corner was the best. The soils there seem to be lacking the till layer below, so it drains pretty freely there. And there's other areas sort of also along that east side where they were able to do roof drain dry wells. So that's the dry wells you were referring to are the roof drains, and that helps keep the water dispersed on the site.
And Mr. Christensen, was I correct? Is this in a critical aquifer recharge area, or is the entire city of Cara? I can't remember.
Well, the entire city is, but this is category 2 for the most part because of that glacial till, which acts as a restrictive layer. Areas where you do not have the till, it would be category 1, and our treatment requirements are higher for the stormwater runoff. The treatment level provided by the bioretention facility, the pond that we're referring to in the northeast corner, exceeds the basic treatment requirement. It actually would provide enhanced treatment if it's follows the design of our manual. So it's a good design given the conditions.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. Did you have any further thoughts you wanted to share, Mr. Christensen?
Only if there are follow-up questions.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Mr. Bradley, I think I understand stormwater fairly well then. Did you have other members of your team you wanted to call on?
No, well, unless Aaron or Raylin want to add anything, but the only other item I wanted to clarify was that we are planning on providing 6-foot cedar fences at all property lines. I know
Thank
that
you. I was
that came
gonna
up
ask.
early on, and that at this point, as the applicant, we believe we're in compliance with all applicable codes, and we agree with staff conditions and ask you to approve the project.
Okay, let me just make sure I didn't have any other specific questions. Yep, we talked about the fence. Oh, the only question, if you have someone that can speak to this, I don't know if one of the Enviro Vector team is here, but I think at various points, there may have been discussion of there being some trails, in the open space areas. But do we know, will that specific mitigation area for the pileated woodpecker, will that be at least split rail fenced off with no trails in an effort to keep people and especially their pets out of those trees? Am I understanding?
Yes, you're
Yeah.
correct. There will be a fence protecting it with signage placed on the exterior of the fence, stating that it's a priority species habitat,
Excellent. And
that's in the conditions.
oh, okay. And Sarah, could you just pull up the map one last time? I'm sorry. I know we're all over the place today. If we, yeah, or maybe the actual plat map would be easier for me. There we go. So you've got the open space tract area as well, not the protected tract, but the one that's in between all the homes in the center.
Yes,
I guess maybe there's thinking there might be trails through there or
correct.
right. Okay, that's what I was trying to grasp. And then I assume, okay, yeah, and it's a pond, not a vault, so that's not open space. Okay, I think I get it all. So the pileated, we'll call it the pileated woodpecker tract will be protected with signage and split rail fence.
Correct.
Okay, and that'll be in an NGPA or whatever terminology Lacey uses. I don't recall if it's the same or different.
I would just note that sensitive area tracts like that can count towards a portion of the plat's open space requirement. So
yeah, it can count. We just don't want
exactly,
people's
Exactly.
dogs
that's
murdering,
exactly right. But they still
murdering
get,
threatened
yeah.
species. Okay, excellent.
Yep.
Great. I think I understand that. So then again, if anyone on your team wanted to provide additional information, fine with me. If not, I think my questions have been answered. I know there were some concerns about traffic from members of the public, but Mr. Hoppy, I think, weighed in on it, and I have a TIA that indicates all roads will be LOSD or better, most of them LOSA. So I don't think I had need of additional information unless you have other team members you wanted to call on, Mr. Bradley.
Hearing examiner Reeves.
Oh, yeah.
Daryl Mitsanaga.
A lawyer,
just-
I'm not going to swear you
Yeah,
in.
you don't have to swear me in. But I will tell the truth.
I trust.
I just wanted to find out whether you had any questions in regards to the comment letter entered in regards to encroachment. We are actively working with the property owners to resolve any encroachment issues, and we intend to have those fully resolved by final plat.
Do you know what exhibit that was? That's ringing a bell in my head. I don't know if I'd missed it somehow.
Boy, maybe it was,
Or Michelle, do you happen to know who had concerns about encroachment? I got traffic, trees, septic, wildlife, traffic, pedestrians, fence. I don't know, but I will take your word for it that you will solve any potential encroachment issues in advance of final plat.
I will just say that it doesn't ring a bell to me either.
And my apologies. It may have been just a letter sent to the applicant.
Okay,
Oh,
So I
okay.
may
I'm
have,
gonna direct.
I may have interjected myself
Count.
into the
counsel,
process
want
with
me
no
to
good
strike
reason.
that from the record.
Never mind.
So I don't have any questions, but thank you for being here, Counselor. Did you have any further thoughts you wanted to share while you're here?
Nothing from me.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, then, Mr. Bradley, anything further from your team? Just want to be clear that I'm not.
No, nothing further from us.
Excellent. And then finally, Michelle, anything further from the city?
nope, I don't think so.
Okay, well, a lot to think about, a lot to consider. I will take all of this into consideration. I am waiting on, am I gonna get those today?
Yep, I'll go ahead and send by email the letter exhibits 38, 39, and 40.
Okay,
Letter
so
comments and the revised conditions.
there you go. So exhibit 38 was the additional letter from Mr. Ben. 39 are the comment, sort of question email from Mr. Orth, who we did hear from. Exhibit 40 is the agreed upon revised condition language between city staff and the applicant.
Correct.
So I will treat the record then as closed today, and I will produce a decision here in the next 10 working days on this proposal. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to answer my questions, participate in today's hearing, and I wish everyone safety and good health as we hopefully are nearing the end of this strange moment in history. And goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.